This program was produced by and first broadcast on Radio Hawke's Bay, a community access media station. Thank you to New Zealand On Air for making this type of programming possible.
I'm a dreamer of 3D pictures. I'm a traveler of a different kind. I'm a builder, I'm a designer, I'm an actor.
Good morning, Radio Hawke's Bay listeners. It's Nikki Mountain here from Dyslexia Unpuzzled Hawke's Bay, our monthly podcast that share interviews showcasing transformation to triumph for members of our community. Our mission is to support neurodiverse individuals and their families with conquering their challenges with literacy, maths and ADHD. As always, we are broadcasting on Radio Hawke's Bay 104.7 FM and 1431 AM. This month it is my pleasure and I'm really thrilled to welcome Professor Julia Rucklidge, a psychologist from the School of Psychology, Speech and Hearing at the University of Canterbury. Thank you, Professor Rucklidge, for coming to join us this morning. It's really lovely to see you.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for inviting me, Nikki.
Oh, look, I heard you speak earlier this year at the Wellness Workshop, and I have been just a fan of yours ever since. So I was astounded by some of your research findings that you shared with us at that event. So are you able to start this morning by just sharing a little bit about your background and what drives your current work, please?
Sure. Okay, so I'm clinical psychologist trained in Canada, originally from Canada, Toronto. And when I was doing my PhD at the University of Calgary, under the supervision of Bonnie Kaplan, who I co-wrote The Better Brain with, she was approached by some families from southern Alberta, Canada, who were talking about using nutrients, vitamins and minerals in a pill form to treat quite serious psychiatric conditions like bipolar disorder and psychosis and depression. At the time, my training in clinical psychology had taught me that only drugs like psychiatric drugs or antidepressants or stimulants or psychotherapy could treat these really serious conditions. And so initially I was a bit puzzled about her involvement and interest in this. But over time, she collected data, and in the early part of this century, she and others published some preliminary studies that showed these families and other people getting well and staying well with nutrients. And so not long after I finished my PhD, I moved to Toronto, did a postdoc there, and then moved to New Zealand in 2000, where I took up a job at the University of Canterbury to teach about child clinical psychology. But I continued to hear about Bonnie's work, and it wasn't, it's not long after I was starting to do research and seen lots of, by then I've seen hundreds of clients and people with psychiatric problems. And you can't help but have that moment where you go, you know what, not enough people are getting well. Not enough people are getting well with our current treatments. And so I decided to study this idea that nutrition was relevant and could have a potentially positive impact on brain health, and that is what has led me to do the research over the last 15 years and also to really explore our food environment, which is what I talked about for the most part at that talk that I gave when I was in Hawke's Bay.
Oh, it was such an incredible talk. What interesting findings, that you could get, that nutrients could just change that so much, I just think that's amazing. So at the Wellness Workshop earlier this year, you did share some startling findings that really made me sit up and take notice. Are you able to please highlight those for our audience?
Sure. By studying the idea that vitamins and minerals can have a positive impact on mental health. And by the way that we've done that from a research perspective is that we compare these vitamins and minerals given in a pill form. There's nothing magic about it. They're just the full broad array of nutrients that your brain needs. And then we compare that to a placebo, which is just what we often call a sugar pill, although it doesn't actually have sugar in it. And that's something that doesn't have the ingredients that you're testing. And you give these to people randomly who have a condition that you're interested in. So in our case, our original studies were on ADHD. And you see whether or not the group that receives the micronutrients has a positive impact versus those who took the placebo. And what we have found from over and over and over again is that those who are given the micronutrients overall tend to do better than those who are on the placebo. There's variation across different studies, and our placebo effect can also vary, and so that can impact on the findings. But we have this very consistent finding is that, the micronutrients always in some way outperform that placebo. So what that forced me to have to think about was, well, why aren't people getting these micronutrients from their food? Because I was naively taught that, just eat a good diet, and I think a lot of people hear that is just eat a healthy diet, whatever that is, and you'll be fine, and you don't need to supplement. And so to find these startling findings of being able to treat some really serious challenges, and in so many cases, Nikki, there's a full turnaround. These kids or adults, they go into remission, if that, meaning that they no longer have those symptoms, they're no longer impaired by them. But we also hear about amazing things that can happen to them in other areas of their life, like their sleep gets better. They reduce their cravings for alcohol, for certain, sugary types of foods. They're less anxious. They're calmer. Their mood is better. So we see this sort of what I like to call a metabolic tune-up. So we see these amazing startling effects, not with everyone, and that's always important to make that clear, that not everyone gets well by taking additional nutrients. But it does make you stop and go, the food environment is not adequately providing these nutrients, and why not? So that led me on this journey, which is what I was sharing with the audience in Hawke's Bay, was that to really investigate our food environment. And what I learned from that, and that's, I think, some of the startling results that you were talking about, is that about half of our calories are coming from what we call ultra-processed foods.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, and ultra-processed foods are, they are foods that are, of course, manufactured in a lab.
Mm-hmm.
They take some real ingredients, but they reconstitute them. They will change them, the food matrix, and then they'll add a whole bunch of things in to make it taste good, to make it addictive. That could be sugar, but it could also be, there'll be preservatives and colors and flavors. They'll add other things in there like emulsifiers, which, hold the whole thing together.
Mm-hmm.
And these things are added in there to make them taste good, for you to want to eat more, but also to have a really good shelf life so that they last a long time.
Oh, I see. Okay,
right. And
all
so
right.
that increases the profit of those foods.
Right.
So, but the easiest way to recognize an ultra-processed food for your listeners is that does it contain ingredients that you do not have in your kitchen.
Right.
So if you don't have in your kitchen, and some of these E numbers or whatever, then that is a good indicator that it is an ultra-processed food. Or if it's got these added things that I've just mentioned, like the preservatives or the emulsifiers or thickeners.
Wow.
That's a good clue.
Yeah.
And so when you define food that way, and then categorize those types of foods as ultra-processed, then what the population studies have shown is that we're eating half of our calories are coming from these foods. And so the problem with that is that not only is there the sugar issue that has been highlighted, all of these additional ingredients that I've just mentioned have a detrimental effect on your microbiome, your gut lining. It starts to cause what we call leaky gut or irritable bowel, or it can just cause havoc in your gut, change the bacterial diversity, has an impact on how you digest your food. But the third problem with these foods is that they're nutrient poor, and they don't contain these vitamins and minerals that we were studying. And so that's where I kind of came full circle and went, well, here's the problem, is that half of our calories are coming from these foods, and that's going up. International data says that 2/3 of the calories that our children and teens are consuming is coming from ultra-processed foods.
Heavens.
So then you start to go, well, they're starving their brain. That's what
Right.
we're doing at the moment.
Okay. Yep.
We're calorie rich but nutrient poor.
Okay.
And so the problem with that, from a kid perspective, is that they don't have the nutrients that are required for them to be able to regulate their emotions, or to be able to concentrate, all these things that are so important for learning, they're missing these vital ingredients that are necessary for your brain to function. All of these things that are happening in your brain, all of the messaging, the signaling, from one neuron to another, all of that requires vitamins and minerals. So if you start to deplete your supply, then no wonder we have so many health issues at the moment.
Oh, right. That just makes so much sense, doesn't it? Must affect people's ability to be able to learn. You must have people, A, out in the workforce, B, at school, students, trying to learn, and their brains are, like you say, just starving for nutrients, and must make their learning really, really difficult for them.
Exactly. And we just simply haven't, as a society, really had this conversation.
No.
Of recognizing there's been a lot of talk about sugar. The food labeling is not generally, in my opinion, helpful.
No.
The star ratings are not about, if there's all those added chemicals in there, that does not affect your star rating system. The star rating system is about low in energy, salt, fat, calories, and then fortified with one nutrient will give you a 5-star rating. So it could be helpful. Like nuts will have a good star rating, and that's something that I certainly would encourage people to eat. But on top, but things like all of our cereals are all ultra processed.
Yeah.
We think they're good for us because they've got all this messaging on them that says they are fortified with nutrients, not in really great quantities, not in the sufficient levels that are required for your brain to work. But people don't know that, and so they're trying to make good decisions for themselves and their family. But the food labeling is not generally helping them to make those really good decisions in order to make sure that your child can be sustained for learning.
Yeah, for sure. So would you surmise then that those kind of deficient foods, the nutrient deficient foods that we're having, so does that have more of a significant effect on neurodiverse individuals with conditions like ADHD or dyslexia or any one of those?
That's a super tricky question to answer because I think it's multifactorial.
Okay.
What we know when it comes to the food environment, and just understand I'm only talking about the food environment
right.
when it comes to their impact on neurodiversity, and there are, of course, other things that can influence neurodiversity as
cool.
well. So I want to make sure that that's clear.
Oh, no, of course.
But when it comes to the food environment, and I'm just talking about research, so it may not necessarily apply on an individual level, but what we know from the population studies is that the more that a mother eats those foods, of these ultra-processed foods during pregnancy, the greater the risk that her child will have a neurodevelopmental problem.
Wow.
So, yes, it doesn't mean that eating a donut during your pregnancy is going to cause your child to have ADHD. That is not what I'm saying. But the more that the diet is consisting of those foods, then the greater the risk. So that's important to know, and that's something that I suspect a lot of pregnant people do not know because it's not shared with them because it's not well known.
Right.
These studies have been published internationally. These associations are well documented. There's also research that shows that the more that the mother eats what would be called a healthy diet, which is low in these ultra-processed foods and high in your fruits and vegetables and your nuts and your seeds and your legumes, your healthy fats, your fish, the fish is particularly important, then the lower the risk. And again, it doesn't mean that if she does all of that right, she will definitely be guaranteed to not have a child with neurodevelopmental disorders, but it reduces the risk. And we're always out to try to reduce those risks. It's like alcohol, cigarettes. We know they incur risk. It's not a one-to-one association, but we know that influences outcome for their child. So we're always trying to do what's going to be best for our offspring. And one thing that you can do is try to address that. We can talk about the cost in a second if you want to.
Yeah.
That's the big barriers. So that's, we know that. So it probably can contribute towards the development of these problems in the first place. There's also research that shows that if you take kids who have are eating more of these ultra-processed foods, and you support them to reduce their consumption of ultra-processed foods, you reduce their ADHD symptoms.
Isn't that incredible?
So that's also a great thing. Again, it's not going to cure every kid, but it does make a significant impact on between 30 to 40% of kids who have ADHD. You can help them pretty much. They will no longer have these symptoms in an impairing way. That's important to know because we know that some people don't benefit from the current medications. They don't tolerate them. They don't like the side effects, etc. From our research with the nutrients, giving those additional nutrients, we also see that we can help kids over the long term go into remission in their symptoms of ADHD. So I guess I can't easily answer your question is around, are they more sensitive to these problems? I think we're all sensitive to these problems. I think we all are going to express them in different ways. For some of us, it might be ADHD symptoms. For other people, it might be feeling really fatigued, feeling really foggy, really low energy, really moody, irritable. Those are all symptoms associated with having depletion of nutrients and also consumption of these additional things that are just not helpful for your brain or your body.
Wow, that's pretty massive, isn't it? That's pretty incredible, isn't it? Yeah.
It is an absolute, Nikki, you have absolutely, nailed it. It is a massive issue. What saddens me is that this research has been out there for at least 2 decades now. And it's been growing over the last 2 decades. Not just those observational studies that I talked about, which is where you take populations and you kind of look at these links. They're challenged because people will say, well, it's not you can't infer causality from that. But there's also randomized controlled trials, which is where you take kids who have ADHD and you manipulate diet and you see what happens to them. Those studies have been out for quite a long time. In fact, some of those studies started in the 1970s and 1980s. So we've known this for quite a while.
Yeah, 1980s has been a while. Yeah.
Exactly. And then the micronutrient studies that we've been done, we started publishing those in 2009. So it's not like this information isn't out there as being one thing that could be done. To date, we have seen no movement from governments to address the food environment. There's, the last election, Labour talked about taxing sugary drinks, but they didn't get in. And then this government has come in and is, tried to take away the school lunches. So there isn't a lot of interest, and of course the food industry, it doesn't want the system to change.
No,
there's huge profits to be made in these ultra-processed foods because they last for so long as opposed to our fresh fruit and vegetables that don't last.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of money to be made, unfortunately. So I don't see any of this changing super soon by any government aspect. But this doesn't stop any individual from using this information and making changes within their own lives.
Wow, that's really frightening, isn't it? And you only have to take a visit to the supermarket, don't you, and have a look at some of the shelves and just see all those packets there. So,
69% of food sold in supermarkets in New Zealand would be defined as ultra processed.
69%. Mm-hmm. Holy moly, that's incredible! That's a big percentage. Far out. So. Is it possible then to reverse the negative trends of what we're seeing in our nutrition?
Absolutely, and I think we have to have hope that we can change this. It's going to take more than an individual.
Right.
A lot of the time, we blame the individual. We say, "Oh, well, it's your fault for what you eat."
Right.
And I don't think that's helpful because all the messaging is there to kind of encourage people to eat these foods. So it's kind of like, surrounding yourself with packages of cigarettes and saying, oh, but just don't smoke them.
Yeah.
But we're going to make them super cheap. So it's just, ultra-processed foods needs to be seen as the next cigarette. So it is that harmful. There isn't a single study that has shown that these foods are helpful for us, that they're improving our health. Every single indicator is showing that these foods are contributing to the chronic health issues that our society faces. So I'm talking about mental health, but it's also, of course, what people are probably more familiar with is that it's contributing to our type 2 diabetes rates, our obesity rates. It's contributing to cancer. So it's contributing to heart disease. It's contributing to Alzheimer's. so we know that it contributes to these really expensive chronic health conditions. So we cannot afford to not pay attention to this really huge contributor, not the only factor, but a huge contributor to some of our chronic health diseases. We cannot afford it. Our health system cannot afford it. We already see that our health system is cracking. It's just falling apart. One of the reasons is absolutely has to do with the food environment. So in terms of turning this around, it's going to take individuals to become educated. I think that's important. It's about then individuals who are educated talking about it. So this is not silent. That that I can't be the only voice to this, that, now that you know about it, Nikki, I mean, what you've done is you've invited me, you heard me speak, you're wanting to amplify that voice, so that's fantastic. So we need to have more people on board and really understanding the negative impact that these foods are having on us. I think it does require, change in terms of our food system. We have plentiful food in Aotearoa, New Zealand. We can feed 40 million people, and yet we have food insecurity. You have food insecurity in Hawke's Bay. There's been research on that. It's about 17% of adolescents identify themselves as food insecure. So how is it that we have plentiful food, but we still continue to have people who cannot access these foods, or it's too expensive? This is not an impossible problem to solve. This is a change of fiscal levers to address this issue. So all you have to do is make ultra-processed foods more unaffordable and make your real whole foods affordable in order to address this issue. That takes political will. That takes interest from communities to vote people in who are going to have that kind of impact. But it can be changed if there's that interest. If there's an interest from the voters, then these things do change. Yeah. So I can only have hope that people want a better life for themselves, that they don't want to develop Alzheimer's, that they want a better life for their kids, they want a better life for the future generation. And in order to do that, this needs to be addressed. And also, if we want to, sort of think deeply about and look at ourselves and how we contribute to this, a lot of our food is exported. So what's driving that fiscal lever? Most of the food in Hawke's Bay, where does it go? It doesn't stay locally. It goes overseas. So what are the drivers there that the growers are required or needing to export most of the foods that they grow? What is happening there? And I certainly I know that growers are they're decent individuals, good stewards of the land, but there's something about the economics that is driving that. I don't understand it. I'm not a food system expert, but I certainly know that people out there will understand it and will know how to fix that if there's the will.
Oh, I just think, just speaking to you this morning, it's almost like you yourself are just sort of standing in front of a train, holding up your hand and wanting it to stop, and it's a massive sort of problem when you put it in perspective like this, and we've got to get this word out there and just say, hey, we've got to stop this train because it's running away. So, yeah, that's incredible.
I think people in Hawke's Bay are well positioned to perhaps change that, because you're in this incredibly rich part of the country in terms of arable land, growing so much amazing crops. How about we feed our, it's like just like on whenever you hear the safety message when you get on an airplane, it's put your own mask on first before helping others.
Absolutely.
How about we feed ourselves first before we export food? There's still plenty to export.
Absolutely.
Still plenty to export. So what can be done about that?
Oh, what a question. Yeah, well, there's a good course of action that anybody can take, is get on board with their MP and get this word out there. So, yeah, how important is it to do that for everyone, for our kids, for ourselves, for everyone out there. So, Professor Julia, I saw you had a free online course on mental health and nutrition. So how do people access this if they would like to?
Sure. I mean, there's tons of stuff. I've done so many talks and radio interviews that if you just Googled my name, there's no one else with my name, Julia Rucklidge. That's a lucky thing. Generally speaking, it makes me very easy to find, though. Is that there's just using that name, but the free online access courses. It's called a MOOC, a Mass Open Online Access courses through edX, which is EDX.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just went onto the edX platform and then put my name in, or nutrition and mental health, really easy to find, and you can start it at any point. It'll always say it starts today, but you don't have to sign up today. It kind of rolls on. But to get the free access, I think you get it for like 6 or 8 weeks or something. If you want to pay, you can have it unlimited access.
Oh, that sounds very cool, and certainly something I'm going to be having a look at anyway. So, absolutely very cool. So, thank you so very much. Unfortunately, I could stay talking to you for the next, 3 hours, 3 days, whatever, about this topic. It's so serious for our community, and it's just so interesting to have your views and the findings from your research this morning. So I really, really thank you for your time this morning. Sadly, we have to wrap this up, and for your incredible work. So we need to get on board and help Professor Rucklidge. She can't do it by herself, so but I guess you're going to be doing some more research moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I certainly thank you for inviting me to speak about it. I'm always happy to talk to people who get it, who understand how important this is.
Absolutely.
And so much appreciated. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And I hope we get a chance to talk again down the line sometime soon. So to our listeners out there, I'd love to hear your thoughts after listening to Professor Rucklidge this morning. This is a conversation that, as we've said, it really can't be discussed enough. So feel free to email me at dyslexiaunpuzzled@gmail.com, or connect with me on my socials, Facebook at Dyslexia Unpuzzled, and on LinkedIn and Instagram at Nikki Palamountain. Thank you so much, our listeners, for tuning in to Radio Hawke's Bay 104.7 FM and 1431 AM. Please note this program will be replaying again on Tuesday at 12 o'clock PM lunchtime, which is handy. Be sure to tell your friends and family about it, and please listen to it yourselves. I really appreciate your time, listeners. Thank you so much. Nikki Palamountain, Dyslexia Unpuzzled.
This is my gift. This is who I am.
This program was produced by and first broadcast on Radio Hawke's Bay, your community access media station. Thanks to New Zealand On Air for making this type of programming possible.